Hi, my name is Chris Beck, and I will be talking about password managers and how this relates to uh, kind of the s- the software subversion research that we've been talking about. So what I'll be going over is the introduction. What is a password manager? The current studies, the LastPass breach, and then kind of final tips and takeaways. So when a security of a computer system is assessed, one of the first mitigation techniques is to, create a strong password. Many of us have uh, companies that we work with that have password policies. Typically, it's a complex password, one that's not easily guessed by another. Something that you wouldn't want a dictionary attack or anything to, um, you know, be found out. Password managers help manage passwords. Like I said, that should be complex in length and characters, depending on system too. Because uh, say at my job, I used to have a 12 character password. Well, now they upped it to 15, and I'm sure in 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 a year it'll be bigger than that. It just gets more complex. Um, Upper lowercase required. It can't be an old password. It has to be a new one, so that they're keeping track of um, old passwords, especially in a Windows domain environment. Uh, Tools like password managers, they can add ease of use in maintaining a list of login usernames and passwords. I have several systems that not only do I have to uh, two-factor in, but I have to adhere to each individual system's requirements. So if you have an older system, they might not be able to handle a 12 character password. They might, you know, but they might, require upper and lowercase. They might require uh, something unique in terms of a password that I hadn't used before, that type of thing. Some password generators like LastPass and OnePass even provide uh, a method of generating a random password. So in LastPass scenario, I can log in and I can say, hey, I want this length and this complexity level. Um, what can you give me? And you know, it'll kind of help you out with that as well. As good cybersecurity practices, we stress the need for strong, unique, and lengthy passwords. Uh, Password management remains challenging for end users such as myself, not only as at home but also at work. Um, Browsers actually kind of started the whole collecting of passwords. The latest browsers like Microsoft Edge, Mozilla Firefox, and Google Chrome, they offer internal plugins that can store username and passwords. And I find that kind of handy too because some of these browsers stretch across different platforms. So not only am I using Google, on my desktop at home, but I'm using it at work. But then I'm also using Chrome, or Firefox on my cell phone. So I'm able to technically, for personal use, um, use kind of the built-in uh, logins and password managers. Now the question is, are they safe? The plugins put the burden of good password management on the users themselves, and usually the plugins that, or even the built-in password managers in these browsers, they don't offer all the bells and whistles a commercial password manager could provide. Um, my workplace actually disables browser-based passwords because it kind of encourages both a mixture of personal browsing and work browsing together, and it's just too easy. And actually, um, I've had experience where I've had two employers, kind of gone off like LastPass. One went to Thycotic and the other one went to 1Password. And this was shortly after the breach that we'll talk about later on here. Um, so there's three different techniques. The browser-based uh, password management system that I talked about that's kind of built in or baked into um, your browser, and those are the most widely used and just basically convenience. It doesn't cost uh, anybody anything. Most browsers are free, so they use it for convenience. There are some other operating system built-in password management systems. I know iOS 10 kind of they use like Keychain, Apple Keychain, for example, um, and I'm sure there's other ones as well. And then also third-party project uh, password managers. Um, I said Thycotic earlier, 1Password, LastPass. Uh, there's a few other ones that I've seen. Um, and sometimes we as users we cheat and kind of use the same password. So there's some like usability issues here. So we're we're sometimes we're saying okay, we need to have good clean passwords and unique and complex, but then when you come home, do you really need uh, of all the systems that you need to be into, do you truly have unique passwords, or are you sometimes reusing it because of a convenience? And you can see third party having, being in a corporate environment, having a third party vendor kind of manage that and match it with your policy in a in an organization that can force some of their policies, um, you know, and make them match so you are changing it so often that you're not reusing it in different you know URLs or cloud-based systems. So like I said before, the password managers for browsers may not enforce policy um, from what your workplace requires and what the vendor um, uses for personal, or what vendor they use for personal use. LastPass I do use at home, but you know, at a corporate level, you can do a lot more, like with like having a group use a shared account because um, you know, as a network engineer, I have access to um, over 200 different firewalls, and they're not using the same, even across different customers. We're not using the same password across all those, so it's difficult to manage uh, those username and passwords. Um, and we've actually kind of moved to a new document system called IT Glue that allows us to um, use OnePass in conjunction with it, and generate like a different set of internal passwords. Uh, but like I said, businesses, they're increasingly using password managers. Usability and convenience, like I said, are some of the top reasons we use password managers. Um, but say if you compromise a machine and it has a password manager on it, that kind of opens the door to, uh, well, I might not be able to see the pass. An attacker can get in and maybe they can't see the password because it's masked, but at least they have a username or something to go on to try and brute force it. And it's most likely the URL or the IP address of the system that you're trying to get into uh, is probably logged there as well. So the paper, in this presentation, we're going to kind of look at password management tools from a human processing perspective, and we're going to look at a couple different authors on what um, types of areas that they study in terms of password management, what kind of modern features do we see in selecting a password management tool, and also kind of discuss a major breach that happened in a company that happened to be a password manager tool creator. Um, so, I just want to stress the need for, uh, continually designing, developing, and implementing secure systems, whether that's, baking in security from the software that you're creating, or choosing, or, kind of auditing your current vendors, or perhaps you're in a situation where you're going to try to and select um, an appropriate vendor for your password management uh, corporate system. So a common feature of modern uh, password managers is that they allow collaboration. Kind of what I alluded to earlier is working for a company. You don't want uh, number one, when you're new at a company, you're usually onboarded to um, a password management system. Um, when I was, in the telecom industry, I was onboarded into LastPass, and it was a group of, um, we had firewalls and switches in there, and we managed specifically the managed firewall services that we provide within the telecom. So there was some separation too, where um, the other groups, say that like the NOC, would probably use their own instance of LastPass, but then they had their own um, kind of controls as to, only the people in their group had access to their instance of LastPass in their group. I believe we ended up going um, kind of system wide with Thycotic, and the reason we went with Thycotic was more because, um, say somebody got terminated or left. There's an API with Thycotic that LastPass didn't have, or we could just, arbitrarily change the passwords to um, anything internal, um, just kind of on the flies as well. Um, so some project uh, policy managers, they can kind of flag a reused username, like I talked about earlier, in an event that it's reoccurring in multiple sites. Because not only are you tracking your password and your login, but uh, you're tracking the URL that you're going to into. Commercial password managers can also kind of do a deep dive into the internet. A lot of them will actually look and compare your credentials to what's found in the latest breach, um, the dark web essentially, um, and, find breached archive dumps and compare it and say, hey, this password is a common password. Um, I know I installed Linux the other day, and I believe the password to Selks user, the username is Selks user for the password, and there's a lot of like, I think Kali uses like root. The root password is like Tor. So there, and we talked about a lot of this during our last technical assignment. Is there's a lot of, you just look up a vendor for a particular um, protocol like Apache, and then you look at what the default username and password is, and you've got it. And some people don't bother changing those username and passwords. Um, so, like I said, commercial password managers, they can kind of recommend which ones need to be changed. They can help generate secure passwords based upon length and complexity. Um, and then they can also match it with an organizational policy. So if the user is restricted to certain websites, um, they've got a group access, or they've got individual access to a partition segment of the overall database. They don't have an overall. Um, and two, you could probably lock that down where you know, you know, if I'm implementing a new firewall somewhere and I want to document that, do I have the right creds, um, or if my coworker needs to get in that same firewall that I just implemented, do they have the correct creds? Can I share them across different users? So, like I said, your organization may prefer a vendor that allows for shared credentials to multiple sites, but they reserve the right to change passwords for auditing and security purposes. So, you may only have a read-only account. I know many of when I set up users for like the 40 Manager product or 40 Analyzer, I give them a default password. They change it, or I tell them they have to change it, and then once they change it, I don't know what it is. Um, but I'm sure there's a master user to, 1Password that, once an employee or somebody gets terminated, they're able to go in and just, kick that user out from going back in and looking stuff up in a more manual process. And also with that, organizations should kind of define the process of termination. How many old accounts are out there that, especially if you're an IT guy, that you have access to a lot. So if you leave the organization, are they changing your default uh, passwords and credentials, or are they leaving that? And I know when I worked for Raven Industries, uh, I was the Active Directory guy, and I was the person that I had multiple accounts. I could make any account I wanted because you know I didn't want to use when I was onboarding an employee. I'm not going to use my credentials to have them turn around and reuse it. So I would use a limited account or a dummy account, something like that. Uh, uh, but in one of these studies, I learned that people, they can only remember 3 or 4 passwords at a time. So, that kind of gives way to having a system, whether it's, in your browser, um, or commercially, or in the operating system that kind of stores and collects, username and passwords on a global perspective. Um, so in this paper, actually this first one back here, Muendo, I believe, they looked at commercial third-party uh, password managers, and they looked at 1Password, specifically in LastPass, and they were looking at adoption rates. So um, they were kind of looking at from a perspective of home versus browser usage versus third party, and third party versus another third party, and so they did a pretty well. These are the actual numbers of how many people they surveyed. They found that out of their pot that 340 were using a browser-based password, 157 were using system passwords or system password manager, and 134 were using third party. And then kind of mapped this out. And then also they went down the line and said a lot of people use Chrome, Keychain, Firefox. Uh, Out of the people they surveyed, if you were using LastPass, Bitwarden, 1Password, KeePass, and there's a good chunk that were using something else. And these were individuals that were maybe weren't forced to use it through their organization or their um, business, but this is kind of probably a mixture of people that were using it both professionally and personally. Um, so, like I said, there's a common feature of most modern password managers, the ability to collaborate. Um, Typically, there's AES encryption in these databases, and really the convenience factor of being able to bookmark your login. I know both OnePass um, IT Glue and Thycotic and LastPass all have browser plugins in addition to desktop applications. At my place of employment, we actually get to use both the internal browser plugin, which is only installed through IT. They removed any they removed all the browser-based options, and they also removed any kind of uh, personal password manager like I was using OnePass, so they disabled that. So they kind of keep that locked down, but these are kind of the top features of modern password managers. This is another study that I was looking at. Actually, this is 2024, so that's incorrect. But um, they were looking at, what does LastPass do versus RoboForm versus PasswordBox. My one login that was in there and need my password, and they were really trying to look at the features of password managers. And like I said earlier, from their study, they found that people really have this need to not only collect passwords but share them with collaborators, and this could be as complex as just a single username password share to an internal team to something as um, more complex, like providing read access only to a single user in a database, or a single URL. Most common password managers have uh, credential encryption just because of the nature of the credential storage. Um, earlier we talked about like browser-based password managers, but those would typically use something like JavaScript to kind of mask and encrypt the credential database on the user's hard drive. And then there's also finally the ability to bookmark URLs. It goes into that convenience of trying to you know adopt a password manager and make it usable. Nobody wants to open up an app on one screen, manually type it in, and then as they're doing their work, referring back to the app when you can just have a plugin auto enter in the credentials and you click one button and you're in, that type of thing. But anyways, their study went on to identify LastPass, RoboForm, my one login, password box, and need my password. And they kind of went through the pros and the cons of that as well. So with the increase of the ability of password managers, we kind of need to enforce password policies, and that's done through whatever software fits the need or whatever software is chosen. Bukti and Rosum, they and I alluded to this earlier. They indicated that the maximum number of passwords an adult can remember is 4 to 5, and either pressure from like your own oneself. So we're all you know in that kind of that network security um, focus. We're probably more likely to kind of look into this and you know us, try and figure out what's secure, what isn't, um, versus say my mom and dad, that type of thing. I'm assuming that they're probably more inept to using something less secure, which would be something like a browser password manager. Um, so then we have re- so we have ourselves, whatever company or organization that we work at, but then we have regulatory authorities like the National Institute of Standard Technology, so NIST, and their best practices stress the need for data security, just taken on by whatever password management uh, software you use. So, um, when breaches happen, you know, somewhere between like 1,000 to millions of passwords can be kind of divulged, or even if they're not divulged right away, as soon as you have that database, you're able to just sit there and, um, you know, most systems, if you have long enough, if you have the time to put into cracking it, it'll be cracked. I mean, it might take you a day, it might take you months or years, but I mean, you know, once you have even in encrypted form, those hashes, you're able to, eventually you knock at the door so many times, eventually you'll get in. Um, so there's another paper. It's the Luvinos, uh, Alazaros, Hershey, and Hay paper. They looked at open source password managers, and they used kind of their um, unique uh, method of application. They actually made their own password manager, um, and but yeah, like they said most of these databases have a format. So if you have a vulnerability found at like the database level, those vulnerabilities, whether it's um, SQL or if it's Microsoft Access, something like that, or Oracle, that kind of carries on to several different vendors. So that's something else to look at. Looking at like the strengths and weaknesses of either closed source or open source password managers, and the strengths and weaknesses of um, browser-based password managers versus uh, uh, commercial. So the LastPass breach. So in the fall of 2002, LastPass um, had kind of started publishing a series of posts as well as sending out emails to customers of a security incident in their company. In the first notification sent on August 25th of 2022, they had detected unusual activity in their development environment, which I believe is this software engineer's corporate machine was hacked, um, and they had gotten a hold of some sensitive source code. Um, and then there was an alert later on December 22nd of 2022, where they had said that somebody had gained access to their production environment from stealing credentials from an employee, and then they had copied the uh, the vault data containing customer account information uh, and the encrypted fields uh, using website usernames, passwords, notes, and kind of this auto fill in form fill data. And but they had said, well, the hacker had gotten the encrypted fields, but they can't decrypt it without the encryption key. But that was derived from and that was kind of their way out, which saying, well, each user of LastPass has their own vault password, and therefore, you know, best practices would be to change your password and make it, something really lengthy and complicated to minimize any kind of potential risks. Uh, and then so really the two indicators of compromise were a software engineer's corporate machine was hacked, and then also malware was delivered to a machine exploiting, another third-party popular software. I guess I don't know what they didn't say what it was, but I mean it's probably either a browser that is 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 something people typically use, or a product like Microsoft Office or Adobe Acrobat or something to that effect. Um, so how do we mitigate this? So earlier I kind of alluded that we have security practices based upon our policies. So our password policies, are they strong enough? Are they clear enough? Do we audit the passwords that we have? Do we force uh, users within an organization to change them every so often? Do we allow them to be reused? Uh, what are our security practices for our password management um, manager product that we use, as well as what are our policies, procedures for our internal employees? How does that differ between internal IT versus a network engineer and what they have access to? Because they're working more with customers versus we're working more with internal employees. And then also, if do we sell some sort of product um, that has some sort of usability controls that maybe we need to bake in security at that level, that application level. Also, with this, how do we prevent bias? Because a lot of this happens kind of under people's noses. They get so many alerts. If you're a network engineer and you get so many alerts a day, you get alert fatigue because there's just so many coming in. You know, I had this discussion the other day. I mean, we need to alert on memory usage on a core switch. Well, yeah, of course, we must do that, but it's like, okay, well, you can't reboot a switch during the day because that'll cause an outage. You know, are we just creating more work for ourselves by having these alerts, and why aren't we tailoring alerts down to um, stuff that we need? Because um, the more secret some of these intrusions are, um, the more um, you know, the deeper they go. But some of these studies that I've seen where, um, the hackers are just hacking in through convenience as well. So they're just using, an exploit and seeing if it works because but they're not going to the level where they're creating their own tool or they're focusing their um, their attack methods on a specific department or a specific person or um, a specific company or even an industry. They're just using generic hacking tools. And and with that kind of, we need to talk about uh, training, security training and awareness. We use um, KnowBe4 at my organization, and um, just kind of, I have monthly training that I have to go to just to keep up to date, and we have phishing attempts just every week, almost every day. I'm almost scared to I'm almost scared to open up my email because if it's something like with a link or something that our Mimecast and email system didn't catch, or they're wanting, it's if it's like comes off as an emergency, well, as a technical support person or somebody who works in service support, you want to help that person out, but at the same time, that could be uh, that sense of urgency you could start making mistakes with. And then lastly, having some sort of incident response uh, procedure or method. Um, you know, the only incident response method that I know of at my organization is related to phishing. But what if I was on the software development team? Is there some sort of, hey, there, you know, we talk a lot about like change management, and do you have the tools to um, log some of that stuff? Because in our group, we don't have we have change management software like FortiGate or FortiManager, where if we make a change to a firewall with a router or policy, we're putting our name in there, we're putting our policy. But there are some systems where if we're using a generic, like a switch, like a Cisco switch, if we're using a generic username and password recorded in the uh, password management software, then how do you know if Adam did it or Billy did it or who did it? So there's pros and cons to that too. But having a timely incident response uh, system, even based upon your skill set or your job title, is good to have. A lot of times, a joke. I think sometimes the CEOs and the CTOs, the less technical people, have more personal policies in a firewall that kind of allows them to get their iPad working or whatever. And sometimes they themselves don't want two-factor in place, so it's kind of like those people are kind of making your company more vulnerable just because they're dictating the ease of use for themselves. They don't, versus, I'm a firewall managed employee. I've got access to a ton of things. I'm two-factoring daily just to open up Microsoft Teams. So, there's that usability versus security argument that I'd say. But so kind of final tips and takeaways. Just constant rehearsal, strengthen existing systems through auditing, through password, forced password changes, changing complexity requirements. Now, sometimes you might have some legacy equipment out there that um, you can't get, you know, anything past a certain number of characters, but you could also do things by having that user change that more often because of the limitations, or when you choose a vendor, going out and saying, well, if I want to put a password in, how how long can I make it? How often can I change it? Are there changing controls that will force me to change it for a specific user or a specific firewall or a specific switch? What kind of options are there? And that goes to the second option here is really refine how you're going to deliver service to your employees, to your customers, and vet vendors. So if a password manager offers a browser plugin or desktop application, is the company going to force install it on my machine, or can I, do I have permissions to my machine to, install what I want? Are you going to uh, disable my personal password manager? Are you going to um, disable, browser plugins and stuff like that? Um, I think when we moved from one pass or LastPass to one password, it was just a couple months ago. One Pass offers ability to switch accounts within the software plugin, so I can use one pass for my personal, and I can use one pass for uh, my work. I can switch between the two, so that's kind of convenient. Um, Timing and tracing, tone, uh, transitions, kind of aim for a seamless incident response program, something that um, your IT can look at that says, hey, um, this person saw something weird, and don't feel bad if if you flag something as phishing and it's not phishing, because you're just you know you're not getting used to um, some of these oddities. You're actually making your organization secure. You're increasing the security posture of your organizations. And if you don't say something, then um, you know that could be an incident, and that could lead to a breach, and that's kind of a bad thing for the organization. So better safe than sorry. Um, Also, enlist colleagues in security awareness training. Um, I don't. I'm There's some tabletop exercises that an organization can do, and there's also you don't have to go out and buy like Nova 4. We use, but there's defense is in layers, so there's Sentinel. Some companies are using EMS systems now. They're doing layered security. We're actually getting rid of Sophos antivirus because our firewall FortiGate will scan, you know, for antivirus with the traffic coming in at that packet layer level. So why do you need an application level security program like Sophos? So um, there's some telemetry involved depending on the vendor that you choose, and just being aware and having fun exercises, um, and like I say, seek feedback, reflect on your current performance on your employees, explore new options, new techniques, uh, set personal and professional goals for yourself, and then also iterate and adapt. So, you know, LastPass I think was breached because they were just so popular. Now people will say, well, LastPass can't be trusted. I'll move on to somebody else. Well, it's just a matter of time. You know, I would think that Bitwarden or 1Password or Thycotic or whatever vendor you choose will probably be breached. It's always the top um, browsers like Edge and Chrome that are, you know, have the most vulnerabilities because they have such a wide usage range, and that's um, you know, what attackers are going for. They're going for the common programs, the common vulnerabilities, and that's how they're able to get in. So, um, thank you. And then if you guys have any questions, uh, there's my email. Like I said, I'm a network engineer. I work a lot with kind of it's called bring your own vendor system. So we do sell like FortiGate products and Aruba switches and stuff like that. But not to say we won't take a customer that you know has a Sophos firewall or something like that, and then um, or a Cisco wireless access point system. We kind of support that as well. And then with any organization, you end up supporting legacy software. So stuff in the past, um, older firewalls, things like that, and that may not have the current features. But yep, I kind of went over the password managers, kind of did a review of what was out there, and went over the LastPass breach and um, what to look for moving forward. So hopefully this was entertaining for all of you, and have a good one.